So one of the greatest responsibilities we have as pro-life advocates is to make a convincing argument for the value of the unborn child's life. We must help others understand how the human embryo deserves the same protection as you and I. And while there are different valid ways to argue this fundamental belief of the pro-life position, some approaches are more persuasive than others. I've tried different ways of telling people why I think the unborn is not just a living human, but a valuable person like you and me. I spent about 10 years of my career teaching a certain argument for that, and then our friends at a group called Justice for All out of Kansas and us started trying something new. We heard an argument from a really smart philosopher in California named J.P. Moreland, Dr. J.P. Moreland, and I was like, ooh, he made this argument from equality. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. What if we were able to, what if we tried that? And we love trying different things. When we, at ERI, when we go into a college campus, we think of it kind of like a lab, where we're doing R&D. We're trying stuff, because I always want to know what is working best right now. Again, not what was working 20 years ago, what is working best right now, which involves a lot of testing. We're trying different things, and sometimes we try things that I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome, and then it fails miserably, right? But then sometimes we try something and it works really well. And of all the different things that we've ever tried on a campus, this is the most shocking, major change that we've made of we have never seen more people become pro-life on the spot than from this argument. Now, sometimes they have to hear it a few times. And it's a little bit philosophical. It's not the easiest argument to learn. I know that. What I'm telling you is it's worth it. Is the pros outweigh the cons. Anyone seen the movie A League of Their Own about the women's baseball league? Like, no one. Okay, well, never. Okay, one of them. Okay, it's that Tom Hanks line. The hard is what makes it good. Okay, well, none of you know what I'm talking about. But hey, at least he's on the same page. So we've tried this a lot on campuses. And before I explain how to make the equal rights argument, I want to talk to you about when you should use it in your conversation. So if you trot out a toddler, if they make an argument for, we need abortion because of poverty, for example, and you're going to compare their argument to killing a toddler so that they can see that there's this hidden premise going on for them. They think the unborn is not a human person, and you do. But they might not be saying it. They might just be assuming it and saying, well, of course we need abortion because of poverty. But you're like, well, we would never kill toddlers for that reason. So you trot out a toddler, and when they say, yeah, but the unborn's not human, or I don't think the unborn's like a toddler or like a person, that is when you know this is time to use the equal rights argument. In contrast, if they make a bodily rights argument, if they make an argument like, well, a woman should be able to do whatever she wants with her own body, or my body, my choice, or something like that, then this is not the time to use the equal rights argument, because this is in the personhood category, okay? This is not bodily rights land. That's a different thing. We're going to talk more about that after this. But first, let's hang out in this personhood category, this other really important part of the abortion debate. You can make the equal rights argument clearly and persuasively by learning the following 4 steps. So if you're taking notes, you're going to want to write down the steps. Step 1 is to step away from abortion, which might seem a little odd since we're having a conversation with them about abortion, but this is very intentional. People don't like talking about abortion. I don't know if you've noticed. And so we're taking an intentional little break from talking about something that's like really like emotional and all that stuff, and I'm going to get them talking about something that they're probably very passionate about: equality. It is arguably the thing that our generation cares about more than anything else. I have a friend who became a lawyer at a law school. She was taught that if you can show that equality is on your side of the argument, you can basically stop arguing. Like, you instantly are just going to win. This is the thing that matters more than anything else. So it's important to kind of ask permission from the other person, because I don't want them to think that I'm dodging their tough question and getting, let's talk about something else. No. So I might say something along these lines. Can we put abortion on the shelf for a minute so I can understand how you think about rights more generally? We'll come back to abortion in a moment. And then I'm going to ask them if they think equality is important, and specifically ask about the right to life, or my personal preference, the protection from violence. I like using that phrase a lot. I want to protect people from violence. So the phrase right to life kind of has like this like pro-life baggage to it now, I think. And so I don't tend to use that phrase. I tend more to talk about protecting entities from violence. So here are some examples of how you could ask that. You could say, do you believe in equal rights for all people? Or do you think equality is important? Or do you think people deserve an equal right to life? But then, of course, my personal favorite would be, do you think it's important for people to have equal protection from violence? But choose whichever one feels most comfortable for you. I'm not trying to make you a bunch of Josh Brahm clones. We're against cloning anyway. We're pro-life. But God gave you a voice, and he wants you to use your voice, not just sound like me. So make this your own. And if they say yes, which they probably will, almost everyone agrees on protecting at least people from violence equally, then you're going to want to point out that common ground. You can point out, yes, of course. Because in the long history of the human race, we've discriminated against all kinds of groups of people that we said are non-persons. And every single time, we've been wrong, right? And so this is really important for us to get this question right. Which leads you to step 2, which is to sort who is in and who is out. So you're going to start by introducing the idea of an equal right to life circle, where everything inside of the circle has an equal right to life, or an equal protection from violence, and everything outside of it doesn't. This is not the circle of things that have some level of value that go in it. No. This is about equal protection from violence. Everything in the circle has an equal protection from violence as opposed to things outside the circle. So it's important to get that right. And so you're going to ask them who they think should be included in that community by providing different examples of living things to include or exclude. What goes in the circle is the question, which builds the foundation for what comes next. It's a very important step. And so usually I will talk to them, I'll ask them about at least 3 main groups. First, I'm going to ask them about human adults. This is kind of the most obvious group. If they don't think that human adults have an equal protection from violence, I've got bigger fish to fry at this point. This is a major, they're having a big problem about the way that they think about equality. And so we're going to talk about that. But most people are going to agree. They're going to agree that human adults should have an equal right to life. And I can even be and I'll even just ask, can we agree that people of all races should have an equal protection from violence? Okay, yes, good, okay. Can we agree that gay people should have an equal right to life? Yes, okay, good, okay. Can we agree, and we just kind of talk about these different groups. Can we agree that disabled people, either physically disabled or mentally disabled, can we agree that they should have an equal protection from violence? Yes, of course. We always find this common ground. Now, there's also an opportunity to bring a little bit of humor into here. I think it is really helpful when you can to try to bring humor into the dialogue. It humanizes you. It shows you that you don't take yourself super, super seriously. It kind of helps the conversation that is already super, super drab if you can just bring a little bit of humor. So sometimes I'll ask about some kind of commonly hated group. You could ask what about the rival sports team? Or what about Nickelback? Should Nickelback have an equal right to life, given all the music that they've made? Everyone gives Nickelback a hard time. I actually don't think it's fair. I think this music's proof is fine. But there's an opportunity. You could just what about people who wear socks with sandals? Do they get an equal? And what's interesting, and I interviewed a Christian comedian on my podcast about this one time, and the main thing I learned from him was so interesting. He said he agreed with this concept, but he said it actually doesn't matter so much that your joke is actually funny. You don't actually have to be a super funny person. What is doing most of the heavy lifting is that they can tell that you're trying to be funny. If they can tell that you're trying to be funny, that's what kind of lightens the conversation. It's not important for you to be a brilliant improv comedian in the moment. You're going to, as you have more and more conversations, you're going to come up with certain things that, that was really great. And you'll log that away, and you'll end up using the same joke, for a lot of people or whatever. But again, don't be worried. It's just they need to see that you're trying to be funny, and that really helps. And then I'm going to ask them about newborns. Should newborns have an equal protection from violence? Generally speaking, in my experience, a lot of people agree. Not everyone. There are about 4 philosophers that I know of that do not believe that newborns should have an equal protection from violence because they think that personhood begins later, after birth. But there's not that many people yet on board with that. I don't know if that's going to be true in 20 years, but right now, still, I'm using the fact that generally speaking, with most people I talk to, and I hope that's true here too, that we can generally agree that newborns should be protected from violence. And we can talk in Q&A if you want about what to do. What if they bite that bullet? What if they're like, well, I don't think newborns are a person's kid? That's a different conversation. We can talk about that if you want to during Q&A. But the last thing that I'm going to ask them about is squirrels. What about squirrels? Like, seriously. Let's think about this. Should squirrels have an equal protection from violence? Because I don't think that we should just like discriminately torture squirrels. Like, maybe hunting them for food, I guess, like if you need to, but like, I can find common ground with animal rights activists. Not everything, maybe, but some things. Like, I can agree that I don't think that we should have like killer whales and dolphins in captivity. I think it's really bad, at least in the States, the way that we have like factory farms. We really mistreat like chickens and things like that. Like, I think that's wrong. I can find some common ground. I don't think that humans and animals are equally valuable, like some of them do, but I can find some common ground. But a lot of people I talk to will agree, okay, squirrels, it might be wrong to kill squirrels, but it's not as wrong. For example, like, if someone's like, yeah, I think squirrels are equal, I'll be like, okay, look, I remember one time, this is a true story, about probably like 12 years ago now, I was driving on my way to work, and I accidentally ran over a squirrel. I know. It was an accident. It was unintentional. Look, I was driving through, it's actually a really beautiful woods. It was in Georgia. I was literally driving through a Civil War battlefield. And it's really beautiful. It's all these trees. But sometimes, like, deer can sometimes get hit on that road. And in this case, a squirrel darted out in the road and did this little kamikaze thing. And I tried to miss it, but unfortunately, I didn't. And I could feel my car go ka-chunk. And I'm like, no, and then I look in the mirror, because I look in the mirror to see it, because I'd seen it happen. I knew it was a squirrel, and I really wanted it to be dead. Like, I didn't want it to be like Scrat in Ice Age, just like, like struggling and in pain, like, and it was thankfully really dead, which was good. But I didn't pull the car over. I didn't call the authorities. I didn't try to give it mouth to mouth or anything like that. Like, I just went to work. And I don't think I belong in jail. But if animals and humans are equally valuable, then I don't know, because what if I ran over a kid that day and just drove to work? Like, that seems, for sure I should be in jail, right? That seems pretty obvious that they're not equal. I'll actually tell you, this is like an aside. If you are talking to someone who's like, yeah, humans and animals are totally equal, I'll tell you the meanest argument I'm willing to make. Like, I'm going to make them a little uncomfortable, but on purpose. This is how far I'm willing to go. I'm going to tell them a true story about a friend of mine named Jacob, a different Jacob than the guy who worked for us, this other guy that my brother Tim lived with for a while. That Jacob was a hunter. And Tim described how one day Jacob went out in the woods with his gun. He stalked a deer. He shot it, killed it. He brought it home, skinned it, and made sausage out of it. And they ate it for breakfast the next day. And of course, just telling this story to an animal rights activist is kind of me. They're like, oh my God! I'm like, I know, right? I'm like, and they're like, yeah, it's terrible. And I'm like, so what do you think should happen to Jacob? And they're like, he should be in jail. Yeah, right? For how long? I don't know, like 6 months? And I'm like, 6 months? What if he did that to a woman? I don't think you're tracking with me. Let me spell it out. What if Jacob stalked a woman, shot her, brought her home, skinned her, and made sausage out of her, and ate her for breakfast? He should be in a Hannibal Lecter mask talking to Jodie Foster for the rest of his life in a glass cage. What are you talking about? 6 months. Like, it's easy to stand on some beautiful university and be like, I think everything is equal. It's harder to live that way. It's like, do you really think that? And sometimes they'll bite that bullet. But I want to try to push them and be like, do we really think that? I think most people don't have that intuition. Either way, I'm asking them about human adults, newborns, and squirrels. We're trying to figure out who should be in that circle and who should be out of that circle, right? And typically they're going to agree that human adults and human newborns are in, and that squirrels are out. Even if you shouldn't kill squirrels, squirrels are still out. That leads us to step 3, which is to solve for X. X is the thing that gets you in the circle. Clearly, some things get to be in the circle and some things don't get to be in the circle. What is it? What is it that makes us equal? What is the thing that we have? Philosophers would call this a property. What is the attribute that you have that is grounding your equality, that explains why you're equal when it comes to at least the protection from violence? So here's how I might set up the conversation. I might say there must be a reason why some things are in the equal rights to life community and some things are out. So let's call that thing that gives you entry X. What do you think it could be? One thing we already know about X is that it can't be something on a spectrum that some people in the circle have more than others. It can't be like a dimmer switch. It's got to be like a light switch. It can't be something you can have more or less of. It's got to be an all or nothing kind of a thing. So if someone says, oh yeah, humans are equally valuable because they're intelligent, that's not going to do the job of explaining equality. You know why? Because some humans are more intelligent than others. And if you don't believe me, then later today, I want you to go to YouTube, click on the first political video you find, and read the comments. Some people think better than others. And it's okay. I'm still pro-equality. They're human beings, you know? I'm just saying intelligence is not going to explain equality because we don't have that equally. It's got to be an all or nothing kind of a thing. And you are asking them this question. It's a clarification question, but you want to get them thinking. I don't want to solve this whole puzzle for them. I think it's more persuasive for them to have to think through it. I'm not just trying to let me show you this cool pro-life magic trick and boom, you should be pro-life. It's not. No, I want them thinking through this. So I'm not asking them leading questions. It's not an argument with a question mark. It's a clarification question. What do you think it could be is a clarification question. Tell me your thoughts. What could it be? And then listen. And then you're going to help them test their answers. And there's all kinds of answers they might give. We'll talk about some of them in a second. But you're going to help them test those answers against the facts that we already agreed on in the sorting process. If they give an answer that excludes human adults or newborns, or includes squirrels, then there's a problem with their answer. We've already agreed. Squirrels are out, and adults and newborns are in. As my friend Trent Horn says, pro-choice definitions of personhood usually either include too many things like squirrels, or they exclude too many things like newborns. So I'm just going to help them to see that pattern that is almost always true. And I'm going to give them time to work through that puzzle. Again, I'm going to help them test their answers. So we as a group, we're going to work through some of the most common responses that pro-choice people give when you ask them, what makes a person? What is the thing that gets you into the circle? Let's start with, what if they say you need to have the ability to think? And in this case, the ability to have mental processes at all. I'm not asking you about any degreed properties, any things that you can have more or less of. We're only talking about threshold things that you either have or you don't have, because that's so much harder to respond to. If someone gives you something like, well, I think the bigger you are, the more valuable you are, I don't need to teach you how to respond to that. That's pretty lame. But almost no pro-choice people say that anymore, so that's good. So they're going to say something more like, no, at some point, once you can have mental processes at all, then you're in. But before that, you don't matter. It's okay to kill that thing because it's not like you and me. Okay, so we're going to run this through the rubric, right? And we're going to do this together. Shout it. So I want you to raise your hand if you think that this would include human adults. Are human adults still in the circle if this is true? Good. What about human newborns? Well, remember, mental processes at all. Do newborns have any mental? Yes. They have. They're not thinking a lot, but there's something going on. There's something that's at least like, I hate this. It's super bright. I'm cold. Let me back in. That's at least what's going on with the newborn. What about squirrels? That's the problem. Squirrels would be included in the circle. Squirrels have at least some kind of mental process at all, and that's the problem. Now squirrels are in. Now squirrels are equal to humans. And I don't think that's the world that I live in. What about the ability to feel pain? And in this case, just to make this more clear, I'm just going to simplify the definition of pain. I'm going to take out any kind of emotional aspect of it and just say the physical feeling caused by disease, injury, or something that hurts the body. Would that include human adults? Would that include human newborns? Good. Would that exclude squirrels? No, it wouldn't, right? Squirrels, almost all animals can feel pain. All right, sort of like maybe things like jellyfish or something like that. But like generally speaking, pretty much the whole animal kingdom can feel pain. And so if the ability to feel pain is what gets you in, now almost the whole animal kingdom is in. Are you starting to track with kind of how this works? Cool, let's do more. Let's get used to thinking through this rubric in our head, because I'm not always doing this out loud for them. This is what I'm thinking in my head. This is a common one. What about self-awareness? The ability to reflect on one's own existence at all. This might be the most common response I get from pro-choice people. Oh, you know what? Let me say really quick one more thing about the pain thing. Some pro-lifers want to talk about rare situations of people who can't feel pain. So Gabby Gingras, for example, is a pretty famous person who has a rare condition like a hereditary sensory and autonomic neuropathy type 5, which means that her nervous system doesn't function the way it should. These are the people that have to be really careful around like hot stoves because they will not feel their hand burning. So they have to, but of course that will damage their body anyway, right? It's really, really kind of scary. The reason I don't think this is that persuasive is because in my experience, it's a good argument. I think it's a good counterexample. It just pragmatically doesn't usually work. I think pro-choice people tend to think of this as something like a weird exception. And so it doesn't typically change their mind. You can still try it. I don't think it's a bad argument. I'm saying I don't usually find it to work that well, so I don't usually go there. Okay, self-awareness. If self-awareness is a thing that gets you in, would that include human adults? Very good. Would that include human newborns? Ah, you're good at this. Yeah, oh, no. Newborns are not self-aware. Now, there are different definitions of self-awareness. The most basic form of self-awareness begins at a few months after birth, when babies start becoming aware of their own body as a physical object. For the first couple months, they don't even know that. But typically, when philosophers talk about self-awareness, they actually mean something even more advanced than that. Something like understanding that you are a unique entity that will exist over a period of time. You can't do that until you're at least 18 months old. So, if self-awareness is the actual right answer to this question, then you are not a person probably for a year and a half. That's a major problem with their argument. Almost everyone can agree that a 15-month-old, baby or toddler is a person. So that's a huge problem. Also, would this exclude squirrels? If self-awareness is the thing that gets you in, would that exclude squirrels? Yes. Okay, so what they have here is they have a newborn problem. They don't have a squirrel problem because squirrels aren't self-aware. Now, other animals are. Elephants, chimps, dolphins, magpies. There's at least 9 animal species that currently general view in animal science is that they are self-aware. Like they can pass the mirror test would be an example. If you put a big mirror in front of an elephant, and before that, if you put a red dot on its forehead, when it gets in front of the mirror, it'll actually use its trunk and rub up against the dot. Most animals don't do that. Most animals do not understand that they are looking at their own reflection. You ever put a mirror in front of a cat? It just it freaks out. It thinks it's another cat. Like that's where most animals are coming from. But there are some animals that can pass this test. So, I'm intentionally talking about squirrels because they're more obvious non-persons. Chimps is a harder case. And we can get into that in Q&A if you want, but I'm not currently convinced that chimps are persons. What about viability? Meaning the ability to survive outside of a uterus. Would that include human adults? Yes, by definition. What about human newborns? Would that include human newborns? Yep, they can survive outside of a uterus too. Would it exclude squirrels? Squirrels can live outside of uteruses. Totally. Almost all the animals can. So they've got a huge squirrel problem, right? What about sentience? Typically, when pro-choice people use the word sentience, what they mean is minimal ability to perceive the world around them. They're having like very minimal basic experiences. They can, tell the sound is happening and understand a little bit about their surroundings, but that's about it. That's what you typically, so it's less than self-awareness. It's more basic than self-awareness. So are human adults sentient? Yes. What about human newborns? Yes, very good. It's a little trickier. See a little bit more hesitation. I'm not trying to trap you. There's no tricks. It's not a trick question. What about squirrels? Would that exclude squirrels? Nope. Squirrels are way sentient. I was reading about squirrels recently because I'm fun that way, and I learned something interesting. I learned that eastern gray and eastern fox squirrels, they don't just store their food all in one place. They store their food in caches all over a 7 square mile area. They memorize dozens of little hiding spots that is buried nuts and things like that. And then when it gets hungry, it'll scurry out to one of them, where hopefully no one's looking, get the nut, run back home. It's like trying to avoid its food getting stolen. That's a way sentient squirrel, okay? Like, if sentience is what gets you in, then almost all the animals are in, because almost all the animals are having, just to survive, a minimal ability to perceive the world around them. Let's try one more. What about being a member of the human species? Would that include human adults? Yeah. Would that include human newborns? By definition, would that exclude squirrels? Yes, it would. Now, this is in my view, simplistic definition of what persons are. This is not exactly what I think persons are. But even though it's simplistic, notice how it's better than almost every pro-choice argument. Like, I can get more precise. I just usually don't. But I'll get into that in a minute. But I'll put a pin in that. But I was showing the point here being, notice how even a simplistic pro-life response is better than almost every pro-choice option that they have, which is going to probably lead you to step 4. At some point, they're probably going to be like, because they've tried multiple tests maybe now and failed each one of them, they might finally be like, what do you think it is? I'm glad you asked. I'm happy to get, and they might ask that earlier. Don't feel like you've got to do it in this order. If they ask earlier, don't be obnoxious and be like, no, you first. No, just like, but a lot of, I'm trying to get them thinking about it first. I think that's more ideal. But at some point, you should get a chance to share your solution. So we've stepped away from abortion. We've sorted with them who is in and who is out, focusing on adults, newborns, and squirrels. And then we solved for X, helping them test their answers to see if they have a squirrel problem or a newborn problem. And in case they haven't asked yet, it's time to share your solution. I'd say something like this. I think the only answer that works with what we already know from our sorting process is something like human nature. It's the only thing that everyone in the community shares equally. And to bring abortion back into it, remember, we put abortion on the shelf. To bring abortion back into it now, that is why I think embryos should be protected from violence. They have the same thing that the rest of us in the equal right to life circle have. So I think they have to be included. It's a lot of times when I do this in like a mixed audience, like with pro-choice people, I'll say like, look, again, and what I'm trying to do here is be open-minded and logical. So what is not happening here is I'm just trying to figure out an argument that will get them to be pro-life. That's called ad hoc reasoning, when you're like trying to figure out, okay, what could be said to kind of get you to the conclusion? It's reasoning backwards. It's kind of the Google Maps way of reasoning. You plug in the destination you want to get to, like I did yesterday. I plugged this in. We were at Dirtledore, way down there, and then I plugged in this place and we'd made a long drive, right? I knew where I wanted to go, and then it gave me the steps to get here. That's not a good way to do reasoning. You don't want to start with, okay, well, I want to end up a Christian by the end of this, or I want to end up pro-life by the end of this because my parents were. No, we should be reasoning from premise to premise and being willing to follow the truth where it leads, wherever it goes. And that's what I'm doing. I am starting with the premise that you and me have an equal protection from violence. It is one of the most obvious things I know. That is the metaphysical basement that I'm starting from. It's an axiom. It's a properly basic belief, I think, basically, that you and I are equal. And then I'm reasoning from there and following the truth where it leads, instead of being like, hey, how can I end up making sure that I'm pro-life? No, that's not what we're doing. And I always say, in the long, sad history of the human race, we've discriminated against all kinds of groups of people, all kinds of humans, by saying that they're not persons. Do we really think for the first time in history that we're doing that again and yet we're right this time? Or do we think maybe this could be another instance in a long, terrible history of taking a certain group of humans and saying they are outside the circle? I don't think we're doing that, and like for the first time now, we are finally right to do that. That doesn't seem like the most plausible option. So, again, notice that I used the phrase something like human nature. I didn't say it's exactly human nature. I said something like human nature. And that means something different than being biologically human. I do not think that you are a person because you have human DNA. That's simplistic. Again, better than the pro-choice views, but I think it's more complicated than that. So we teach people to say something like human nature, which grants you access to the circle, but we do not think that it is precisely human nature. And this might sound confusing. It's like, why wouldn't you give them the precise answer? I'll tell you why. I can give them a precise answer with a bunch of big philosophical words. And I've tried that. I tried it one time at a really hostile university outreach because I was, frankly, just trying to show off my smarts. I thought maybe they will take me seriously if I start using some big words. And they'll like indicate to them, okay, maybe he's kind of smart. It didn't work. It just screwed up my conversations. So I will go precise when I'm talking to like a philosophy professor that I know can like swim in those deep waters and it's going to be fine. I skip this and I go straight there. But you don't need to go advanced philosophy with 99% of people. You can just say something like human nature, and that kind of gives them enough, like enough of a sense of where you're going that surprisingly almost no one asks. I can't believe it. I would expect them to be like, you said something like, what does that mean? Almost never happens. It just goes right by them. And I actually currently think it's the most loving thing I can do for them. It is more loving than taking someone who can barely swim and throwing them into the deep end of the pool and hoping for the best. Like, it doesn't help the conversation to go better. So, if you're interested in what is the super precise answer, I know there's at least one philosopher in here, we could do that in Q&A if you want, but if nothing else, I'll tell you where you can get that answer. In the Equip for Life course, it's an online course that we made that I think SPUC just gives you access to. I think that's still the case, but if not, it's cheap. If you go to equippedcourse.com, you can find it. It's got 10 modules. It's about 5 hours long with dialogue tips and a whole bunch of pro-life arguments, more than we've got time to do today. It's more comprehensive. And we made an entire hour-long advanced philosophy module where we get into exactly what we mean by this. But I don't think we have to do that today because I don't think you really need to know with almost all the people you're ever going to talk to. But again, Q&A is about what you guys want to do, so we'll see what happens. So, just as a quick review, before moving on to the other category, we've covered a lot of material. So, step one is a step away from abortion. You're going to ask the other person if you can talk about something other than abortion and come back to it. And then ask if they think equality is important, specifically the equal right to life. Make sure to acknowledge common ground. Step two, sort who is in and out of the circle, and then you're going to solve for X, and then you're going to share your solution, which is something like human nature. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about bodily rights arguments. Again, I don't know if we're going to have time for Q&A in this one. I'm talking a lot, but I'm going to go kind of quickly. There's two different kinds of bodily rights arguments. There's an easy category to deal with and a tough category to deal with. The easy category is what my friend Trent Horn calls sovereign zone arguments. This is the one where they're like, a woman can do whatever she wants with anything inside of her body. And that's pretty easy to respond to. In fact, it's so easy, I'm actually going to, for the sake of time, move on to the tougher stuff. Because frankly, that idea of this argument being an inherently extremist argument is often enough to get them off of this. This is a bad version of their argument. So often I can get them to make a better version of their argument, which is what my friend Trent Horn calls a right to refuse argument, which doesn't say that a woman can do anything she wants, but it does say that a woman should have the right to refuse to be hooked up to other people. So this is most famous in a philosophy thought experiment called The Violinist. Who's familiar with the violinist thought experiment from Judith Jarvis Thompson? Oh, a good number of you. I'm really glad, but some of you don't. So I'm going to summarize real quick. So Judith Jarvis Thompson, a really brilliant philosopher from MIT, in 1971, 2 years before Roe v. Wade, writes one of the most important papers in modern philosophy. called A Defense of Abortion, where she made a lot of interesting thought experiments, but the famous one is the one in the beginning. Because she was seeing the sovereign zone argument thing. And she was like, that's too simplistic. Let's make that more nuanced. And she succeeded, I think. And so she uses this thought experiment. She says, imagine you wake up in a hospital bed, not where you went to sleep. So you're freaking out. Immediately, you notice a tube coming out of your body and into a man in a coma in the bed next to you. You are now really freaking out. The head of the hospital comes in and says, oh, good, you're awake. Oh, my gosh, this is so crazy. Let me explain what's going on. I'm so sorry. Okay, so that guy is a world-famous violinist with a kidney problem. And you were kidnapped by the Society of Music Lovers. Somehow they found out that you're a kidney master. They kidnapped you, and they hooked you guys up, and then they left you both here. And I'm sorry, this is so unjust. But here's the problem. The violinist, he's a person. He has the right to life, equally. So we can't unplug you. If we unplug you, he will die. But here's the good news. You only need to stay plugged in for 9 months. And then he'll be viable, and then we can unplug you and you both can go your merry way. So you only have to be here for 9 months. Take a second. If you haven't heard that argument before, do you notice how interesting and like a good pro-choice argument that is? That's pretty good. That's so good that a famous Christian apologist named Greg Koukl in the States said he heard that argument for the first time on talk radio, back when talk radio was more of a thing, and he literally had to pull the car over on the highway because he's like, I think that might win. I mean, I think that actually might be the best argument. But there are problems with it. And I'm going to skip a couple of the less persuasive ones, again, for the sake of time, and go straight to here's where I start with, which is called the responsibility objection, which says that when you have consensual sex, you are engaging in an action that you know may result in the creation of an inherently needy child, or an inherently vulnerable child, maybe, that you owe compensation to. Here's a thought experiment to explain that idea. So don't be those pro-lifers that are like, anti-thought experiments. No. Thought experiments is like, this is where we in philosophy try to lab test arguments, where we try to isolate, one thing at a time. It's like the most scientific way to try to figure out what our intuitions ought to be. We are pro-thought experiments. And so I'm going to give you a pro-life thought experiment. Imagine a room with a baby-making machine in it. This is even weirder than the violinist story. So it's like kind of like a Coke machine. It's got a big button on it and like a chute at the bottom. And here's the thing. If you go up to the machine and you push the button, you will have a very pleasurable experience. But every once in a while, a newborn baby comes out the chute. Are you tracking with me? We've simplified pregnancy. Are we all on the same page? Okay, good. Okay, so now imagine a dude goes up and he decides he's going to push that button. He wants that pleasurable experience. He does not want a baby to come out. He's rolling the dice from his perspective. He pushes the button, and what do you know? A baby comes out. It seems pretty obvious to most pro-choice people I talk to that he doesn't get to just walk away and leave it to starve to death. And it's even more obvious to most people that he doesn't get to directly, intentionally kill. He doesn't get to bash his brains in. Why? Because he pushed the button. In other words, he engaged in an act that he knew might result in the creation of an inherently needy child that he now owes compensation to. Meaning, he needs to either care for this child that he created, that he knew this might happen, or he needs to transfer that care to someone else. That's fine. But he doesn't get to kill it. It morally matters that it started with him engaging in an act that he knew might do this. Now, that's a really good argument. That is so good that one of the most brilliant pro-choice philosophers today, named Michael Tooley, said one time, admitted in a debate, that he never uses bodily right arguments at all. Because in his words, the responsibility objection crushes the violinist. So he uses a very complicated anti-fetal personhood syllogism instead. But a lot of you already see the problem. Responsibility objection does not respond to all pregnancies, does it? It doesn't respond to the pregnancies that result from rape. In that situation, this is not a woman who, pushed the button. It's more like she got thrown into the machine. Like, it's not her fault. So when a pro-choice person combines the right to refuse argument with the idea of rape, you get what I think is the most difficult pro-choice argument to respond to. And there's two pro-life approaches to it. There's the obligation to help approach, which basically says you don't always have an obligation to help people, but in certain circumstances you do, and pregnancy ought to be considered one of those. Sometimes I talk about the idea from Up. I'm going to skip that for the sake of time. I'll just give you like another one. For a long time, we were using this thought experiment about this idea of a de facto guardian. It's like, what if this woman woke up in a cabin in a blizzard, not where she went to sleep, and there's a newborn there with her, but they're snowed in. They're going to be there for a few months, but it's not her newborn. She recently gave birth. She's lactating, but it's not her baby. It's a different baby that she must breastfeed for it to be able to survive. And it turns out that what's happened is she's been kidnapped by the Society of Philosophers. So a bunch of philosophers have been they were like, we're tired of doing thought experiments, let's just do experiments. So they've been tying people to trolley tracks and all kinds of things. All kinds of things have been going really bad. That's an inside joke for like 5 of you, but anyway, I can't not. So this is a fine approach. This is a perfectly fine approach. But we've found something in the last several years that works better. And it's not even totally original. It's just something that we started emphasizing differently, and we found. So instead of the obligation to help approach, we've started using the obligation to not freaking kill people approach. This is different. This approach doesn't bother arguing for when you're obligated to help other people and when you aren't. It argues the very modest claim that you never have the right to intentionally kill innocent babies. In other words, the problem with abortion isn't that the baby is entitled to help and you're refusing to give that help. The problem is that you're killing the baby. This is the most philosophical we're going to get, but just buckle up. Just like hang with me just for a few minutes. So we need to think carefully about what happens in abortion procedures for this argument. Not because I want to, not because I like making people think about hard things, but because in this situation, the details matter. If pro-choice people are going to sometimes make really good philosophical arguments, we need to respond with more than just bumper sticker slogans, Bible verses, and graphic images of abortion. We need to also be able to respond with good philosophy, and in this case, the details matter. In the earliest stages of pregnancy, the woman ingests a drug to separate the embryo from the placenta, which is how he gets his oxygen. After he suffocates, he takes a second pill to cause cramping in the uterus to expel the now dead embryo. Once the embryo is too big for the woman to safely have a chemical abortion, the abortion practitioner uses suction or forceps to dismember the fetus. If the fetus is too big for a dismemberment abortion, then he's first given a shot of digoxin to stop his heart, and then the woman gives birth to her dead baby. Here's the point. If someone killed a toddler by either suffocation, lethal injection, or dismemberment, no one would say that you just didn't help the baby. No, you killed the baby. It's different. These are lethal actions against a helpless, innocent person. So I think, and this is kind of like what I'll end on. What we've as we've been thinking through this, I think the reason why pro-choice people are a lot of times confused is because they're a little bit confused about pregnancy. Because when you're pregnant, you only have two options. You can help or you can kill. You can help by carrying the pregnancy to term, at least, and then maybe transferring care to someone else, or you can kill it. But that's confusing, I think, for a lot of pro-choice people, because most of the time, in situations like this, you actually have three options. A lot of times, you have a not help option. If Emmett had a kidney problem, Emmett's not even here, but actually, let's do Owen since Owen's here. Owen has a kidney problem, and he asks me to donate one of my 2 kidneys to him to save his life. I have 3 options. I can either help him by donating my kidney. It would be really, really nice. This is what philosophers call a supererogatory act. It's above the call of duty. Pin a medal on that guy kind of thing. I could say thanks, but no thanks. Or I could directly kill him. I could be so codependent that I'm like, I can't stand the idea of a pro-life colleague knowing that I wouldn't donate my kidney to him, and so I kill him. I must use a weapon because clearly Owen could take me physically. So let's just say I use a weapon. Those are 3 distinct options. Does that make sense? But in pregnancy, you don't get that. Pregnancy is more like if you took a boat out and you went out to sea on your own boat, and then you discovered that there was an 8-year-old boy hiding in your closet. Now, we used to use a homeless man instead of an 8-year-old boy, and the homeless man didn't work as well because then there's kind of this like question of like, are you in danger? What's going on? So I just haven't switched the picture out. So just imagine this is a picture of a very hairy 8-year-old boy. Okay. So there's an 8-year-old that's hiding on your boat because he was playing hide and seek at the docks. He's kind of dumb. And he hit on your boat, so he won. But now you have a problem. He's the hide and seek champ, but now you have not 3 options, you have 2 options. You can help him by taking the ship back to those docks and helping him find his parents, or at least helping him find authorities that will help him find his parents, transferring the care. Or you can throw him overboard and keep going. Now, I've had one pro-choice person try to be like, but maybe he could swim to shore. No. No, this is not the end scene of Jaws, where there's like, these like buoys and they can just like dog paddle, a couple of miles to shore. No. He's shark food now. He's gonna drown. This is a kill situation. This is not a just not help. You are killing by throwing the baby overboard. And that is more like the situation of pregnancy. You can either help or you can kill. I would not usually ask people to help others, especially by doing as much as what pregnancy entails. But if your only option is to help, even with something like that, or to directly kill someone, then I think you have to help. You don't have to help every single person, but you do not get to kill anyone. So if my only options were to donate a kidney to Owen or to kill him, then at that point I am obligated to donate my kidney, because you don't get to kill innocent people. So because I think the most convincing view of equality includes the unborn, and because I think pro-choice bodily autonomy arguments, while super interesting, ultimately fail upon closer inspection, I continue to believe that the unborn should have the same equal protection from violence as any of us do, even though they are incredibly vulnerable during the first 40 weeks of life and depend on the mother to survive.